The Japanese pharmaceutical corporation Kowa announced yesterday that it has determined the controversial antiparasitic Ivermectin has a, quote, antiviral effect against Omicron and other coronavirus variants in joint non-clinical research with Tokyo's Kitasato University. According to Reuters, these results are not from a phase 3 clinical trial showing effectiveness at treating disease in humans.
While his reaction was limited, Joe Rogan, of course, did not miss a chance to weigh in on the announcement. Rogan was flamed by critics, of course, for sharing that he took ivermectin to treat COVID back in September. So this was, right, I read the headline, and then I saw the correction, and then I had to read it again and read the correction again. And I had to do that about 100 times to understand what what they were saying was now wrong about what they had said initially.
Effective against Omicron switched to antiviral effect.
Right. And the difference, if you really get into it, is that, effective against Omicron would be like they had tested it in humans or some living animal. Right. And all they had shown is that if you inject ivermectin into a tube with the coronavirus, it does not lose its it has some sort of effect.
Well, we actually don't know. We actually don't know what the company's talking about because they didn't say anything else. So they released a press release, and in the press release, they said that all they said was they were happy to announce or something that ivermectin worked as well against Omicron as it had shown to work in previous variants of COVID. That it had an antiviral right. That had the same antiviral effect. And then they went on to say, this means if we're making a small dent in the coronavirus pandemic by getting this information out there and by potentially distributing ivermectin. It seemed like at the very end of the press conference, hard to tell because you have to translate it from Japanese using translation software. It's not always perfect. But they were saying it has the same antiviral effect against Omicron as it did against these previous variants. They didn't say anything else beyond that. So we don't know in what study they're talking about. We don't know how they studied it. We don't know anything else yet. That's all we know. Right. That's all they've said.
Well, they jumped the gun. They're trying to get people interested in ivermectin without having any backing to show that there's a reason to be excited about it.
Right, because the antiviral effect is something that we've known about from very early on, and that was, right. Kim, correct me if I'm wrong here, that was really the thing, that it was shown to have some antiviral effect in labs, and that was the thing that got people really excited about it. Plus, then there were these studies that were showing it to have some effectiveness in Africa and Bangladesh and elsewhere. The hypothesis now for why it was effective in Bangladesh is that, and places in Africa, is that there were so many people who had tapeworms, so that it was addressing those underlying conditions. And by addressing those underlying conditions, it allowed the immune system then to focus more precisely.
I mean, we don't know if all these people had worms.
We do know that
a higher percentage of people living in those countries have undiagnosed tapeworm or other worm conditions.
I don't think they do. I think the issue, and the reason why Japan started looking into it, so Japan actually authorized the use of ivermectin. The head of the Tokyo Medical Association, August 13th, came out and said,
I thought specifically Japan has not authorized it.
They haven't. It's not listed as an actual official treatment against COVID-19 in Japan, but the head of the Tokyo Medical Association did say you're free to use it. You're free to prescribe it. Your patients are free to take it.
But that's not just like here.
Forbidden.
Which to me it should be, because it's shown that it's not harmful.
Right.
No, but the reason
its status in Japan is the same as its status here. Your doctor can prescribe it to you, but it's not recommended.
Here, it's kind of hit or miss. It kind of depends. But in Japan, the reason why they did that specifically was because they were looking at data in Africa. They went and looked at all of the countries in Africa that were actually taking ivermectin as a prophylactic. So these people, for other reasons, there's countries in Africa that administer ivermectin regularly because of the parasites, high levels of parasites. So people take it on a regular basis over the counter in Africa. And they were looking at those countries. And they were seeing very, very low rates of COVID. And they were saying, okay, and there could be other correlating factors, but that was something they saw, and they said, well, then maybe there is something here. Plus, like what you mentioned, Ryan, the Australian study early on that showed that ivermectin worked in a lab in a test tube. And then, look, the bottom line is it hasn't been properly studied. I mean, we have various clinical trials, pretty much most of them flawed. going in either way with whether or not it works or whether or not it doesn't work. We haven't really given it a fair shot. But, in fairness, nothing else has really had perfect clinical trials either. You could say that about pretty much every single medicine, treatment, even the vaccines that we have. You could criticize every single clinical study. Really, you could criticize every clinical study ever done for anything. You could find a flaw. But so there's all these flaws that have been found. But the bottom line is, if it is showing still to have some sort of antiviral effect, why is our government not looking into it? Why is it turned so political that when Trump came out and said hydroxychloroquine and then ivermectin got lumped in with it, suddenly it was, you don't care about the research, we're just not going to do that thing. And now people are we're 2 years into this pandemic. I know personally people who are triple vaccinated and have recently gone to the ER with COVID. And what are they given? They're given vitamins. We don't have anything else. And they're unwilling to study anything else, and they put all their eggs in one basket. And now
I think
here
the
we are.
vitamins are doing just as much as the ivermectin.
Well, and maybe they should study that, right? Vitamin D was also demonized, by the way, early on in this pandemic when vitamin D showed to have some effect. Everybody said, no, how dare you talk about anything but vaccines? And
it's been demonized,
the biggest problem.
Ivermectin's been has been put on a pedestal as, oh, this looks really promising. Sure, we should study it more, not disagreeing with you there, but the people saying it looks promising absolutely jump the gun. We don't have any research to suggest that.
And there has been a decent amount of research, and there hasn't been anything that's shown.
It's not a magic bullet. It might help some. It might have some very slightly positive correlation with having a slightly easier time with the disease in some other countries that have tapeworm problems. Maybe that's not a great. I mean, that's fine, but. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like the way people rave. The way some people rave about it does not jive with that, which is the reality.
I mean, I don't know. Everybody's got their own reality on this thing, I suppose. I know plenty of people who've taken it, who are vaccinated, unvaccinated, as a prophylactic. Everybody's got their, did it work for them? Did it not work for them? I don't know. It's hard to say, but I know that
pretty
people.
Easy to say. I think it does not work.
I don't know if it's that easy to say. I don't know if it is that easy to say. I know plenty of people who've taken it and have had great results, or so they think, compared to people around them who maybe didn't have as good of results. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to know, but that's what we need to be studying. I don't think we could say really either way clearly because there hasn't been any real good studies on this. So it's totally unfair to make a judgment at this point. I mean, they just haven't. There's like 64 studies.
Haven't they studied it?
You could study it to a degree, right, without funding. It's very difficult when it's so demonized, nobody really wants to touch it. So there have been quite a few studies, and many of them have come out promising. The problem is, anytime it comes out promising, people are very quick to jump on that clinical study and say, no, it didn't work. And then they give us instead very botched studies. I mean, there was that one study that said, it even makes it worse for people. And they were giving it to people who were already hospitalized. And doctors were saying, that's not even when you're supposed to give this. You give it out like you give out the new Pfizer pill. You do it early. You can't do it late. I mean, if we took that Pfizer pill and we gave it to people in the hospital, it wouldn't work as well. But we don't do that. We say, no, you give it early and it works.
I don't think it matters if you give it early or late or not at all or in a heavy dose or in what form, because there's no evidence that it works. It's like it'd be taking goldfish. Like, maybe you're right. Some people ate goldfish and then they recover from COVID, but it has nothing to do with the thing. There's no evidence that it does. We need evidence that it does.
There's plenty of evidence. There's plenty of evidence. Whether or not you like the evidence or you think that the evidence is flawed is fine.
Well, there's evidence. There's evidence of a mild positive and a mild. There's evidence in both directions, and it's not a large correlation at all. It's not. There's no evidence of a large correlation. There's some evidence of a very tiny correlation.
Sure, it might not be a magic pill, that's for sure, right? I mean, nothing at this point seems to be.
That's sold by.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe for some people unfairly, sure, and we could criticize that. But, obviously, I do think that the thing that seems to work the best at this point to prevent hospitalization and death is vaccination. But there's no reason to be against treatment. And, being pro-vax doesn't mean you have to be anti-treatment. And that's the thing I think we need to break free from. You can be pro-vax and pro-treatment, because guess what? People who get vaccinated are getting COVID, and they would like something other than go home and eat some chicken noodle soup when they're frightened out of their minds.
I worry that people look for, not just about COVID, about anything. People look for snake oil cures. People look like holistic, natural this, and if I only blue fruit roll-ups, I'm gonna be in better. And all that stuff is just BS. It's all BS every time.
And I'm fine if a doctor prescribes somebody ivermectin and they take it, that totally fine. The risk comes in if people start to falsely believe that there is a super effective treatment called ivermectin, and then they make their decision, they make their risk calculus on whether or not they get vaccinated based on, I don't need that because I've got this super effective treatment that I can take. So then they roll the dice, then they get COVID, then they take ivermectin, and they're like, wait a minute, why didn't that work?
Yeah.
Now I'm in the hospital and I'm dead.
Yeah. All right, well, we got to leave it there.
Everybody should. Yeah, definitely risk, at your own, we know the high risk categories, so be safe, everybody.
And it's not, it is a medication. It's not that taking it, that the media mischaracterized that people are taking this medicine only for horses and yes.
No, it's a human
prescribed to human beings, that was all nonsense. But
right dose is not dangerous, right?
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll have more Rising right after this.